I'm Anissa Milik, and this is my presentation on why the Sega Dreamcast failed. This is a brief history on the Sega consoles. Sega started to release home video game consoles in 1988, and the Sega Genesis was the fourth generation video game console that was a direct competition from the original Nintendo Entertainment System. The Sega Genesis was the most successful and most popular console that Sega released. What followed was the 32X, not so much a console but an accessory designed to play newer 32-bit games, which is this one. The Sega Cd was the next, also an add-on, which would allow you to play CDs with your Sega Genesis. It allowed Sega to also release games on a CD that could be played on the Genesis. The Sega Saturn was a CD-based console that started the fifth generation of video game consoles, along with the Nintendo 64 and the PlayStation. Each successive release after the Sega Genesis was subpar, with the 32X and the Sega CD being among the worst video game consoles of all time. As a video game player, the consumer, it seemed that the Sega lacked identity in its early consoles, which affected the Sega sales. Sega Dreamcast was ahead of its time. After Sega's previous video game console failures, the Sega Dreamcast signaled Sega's return to form. People praise the Sega Dreamcast for it being ahead of its time. It was designed to give gamers the true arcade experience at home. Dreamcast has also made some memorable games such as Crazy Taxi, Jet Set Studio, and Sonic Adventures. The Dreamcast was the first 6th generation 128-bit console to be released. It was also the first console that allowed online play over the internet. It came with a 56K modem. You could also purchase a keyboard and a mouse to use with the Dreamcast. Here's some pictures. This is the VMU for the Dreamcast. The Sega Dreamcast controller was very innovative thanks to its visual memory unit, the VMU. It was also an auxiliary screen combined with the memory to save games. You could also say it was an early version of the Wii U. Sega also created one of the first motion controllers for the Dreamcast, which was the Sega Fishing Controller, designed to be used with Sega Bass Fishing Game, which is this one down here. Sega launch missteps. Sega decided that they wanted to be the first to launch their 128-bit video game system. Looking back on their previous consoles in the 8 and 16-bit era for inspiration, they realized that the first system that is released usually does the best. Sega, however, did something that no company would do today. They released the Sega Dreamcast in Japan on November 27, 1998, almost a year before the North American launch. During the time between the Japanese launch, the Dreamcast, and about 6 months before the North American launch of the Dreamcast, Sony announced that the PlayStation 2 would be released soon. Sega invested over $100 million into the marketing blitz leading up to the North American launch of the Dreamcast on September 9, 1999. The advertising did not focus on the right thing to sell the system to gamers. Instead, Sega came up with a very weird slogan that nobody really knew the meaning of. And that slogan is, "It's thinking." Sega wanted to be the biggest advertising wanted us to be the biggest advertising campaign in the video game history, which culminated in a commercial that only aired during the 1999 MTV Video Music Awards. We can view the commercial in the next slide.
We got her! Hi, Randy.
Well, hello.
It's thinking.
That was a commercial. I would say it was a very interesting commercial. Factors that caused the Sega Dreamcast to fail. After a successful North American launch for the Dreamcast, where Sega sold over 500,000 Dreamcasts in just the first 2 weeks, but the early success did not do enough to help Sega overcome the poor sales from the past 11 years. Third-party developers did not join the Dreamcast revolution, and one of the biggest third-party game developers was EA Sports. They wanted exclusive rights to provide sports games for the Dreamcast, but Sega refused and developed their own line, 2K Sports Games. Other game developers were also reluctant to make games for Sega because of the history of the poor consoles of the past. Online gaming on the Dreamcast was almost useless. The internet was in its infancy, and the 56K modem wasn't really all that conducive to online gaming. Sega had a great idea, but it was just too poorly released. It was just too early to release a console with this feature. Piracy was also a problem for the Dreamcast. Sega used GD-ROM discs for their games, which would hold 1 gigabyte of data. Hackers were easily able to crack these and create bootable CD-ROM that contained game data from Dreamcast discs. The biggest factor that caused the Dreamcast to fail was the introduction of the PlayStation 2 and the fact Sony implemented DVD support during the time period of DVD players. During this time, DVD players were very expensive, sometimes costing more than the video game system themselves. By having a DVD in the PlayStation 2, consumers could have a game system and DVD player. Something that the Dreamcast could not do, which Dreamcast could not do, is what I'm trying to say. Which one would you buy if you had the choice? Would you buy a PlayStation 2 that had the DVD support, or the Dreamcast, which didn't have it which has that as an add-on? The end of the line for the Sega consoles. After a great launch, Sega sales continued to slide with the Sony PlayStation 2 on the horizon. People were not buying the Dreamcast. Sega made the decision to stop selling the Dreamcast and shift the company's focus to developing games. So in less than 3 years, the launch from the Dreamcast was the end of the line for the console. And that's the end of my presentation.